Welcome. Settle in. The air in the city of Cinderfall is still tonight. A fine gray dust drifts down from the upper levels. It coats every surface in a soft, soundless blanket. The only noise is the low hum of the city's life support, the groan of ancient buildings settling into their own decay. Far above, the spires of the elite scrape a sky that has forgotten the color blue. Down here is the gloom. A world of eternal twilight. A world of concrete canyons and forgotten districts. Tonight's story, Urban Safari, begins in this gloom. It is a tale of a sport for the rich, a hunt for the bored, and a guide who has seen too much. It explores the dark wilderness man has made, and the creatures he has made to inhabit it. Our guide is a man named Elias. He is not a thrill seeker. He is not a corporate titan with a taste for blood. He is a man who remembers trees. He remembers the scent of real soil after a rain. Once he was a bio-tracker. He worked to preserve the last of the world's natural fauna. Now he works for Xenahunt Excursions. He guides the wealthy into the dead zones of the city. He helps them hunt the strange new fauna the corporations have created. He is a man with a heavy heart. And a heavier debt. A debt that keeps him chained to this job he despises. Elias stood in the sterile white prep room of the Xenahunt headquarters. The air smelled of ozone and gun oil. He methodically cleaned a high-caliber pulse rifle. The weapon felt cold and wrong in his hands. It was a tool of pointless destruction. Not like the tranquilizer darts and tagging equipment of his past. He lived a life of contrasts now. His apartment was a small, quiet space in the lower levels. It was filled with relics from his old life. A terrarium with a single, struggling fern. Data slates filled with images of lush, green jungles. And a single, framed photograph by his bed. It was of his sister, her face pale but her smile bright against the sterile white of a hospital pillow. Her genetic condition required constant, expensive care. The kind of care only corporate money could buy. This rifle was the price of that care. The door to the prep room hissed open. His clients for the night arrived. They brought with them the scent of the upper spires. A clean, artificial fragrance that never quite masked the scent of power. 3 of them. They moved with the easy arrogance of people who had never known hardship. Their gear was the best money could buy. Polished chrome and matte black polymers. It hummed with a quiet, efficient energy. The leader was a man named Kessler. He was tall and lean. His face was sharp. His eyes held a look of predatory boredom. He was a man who had seen and done everything. Now he was searching for a new, more expensive sensation. He clapped Elias on the shoulder. The gesture was meant to seem friendly. It felt like an assertion of ownership. "So you're the guide," Kessler said. His voice was smooth. Confident. "They say you're the best. The one who knows the zones better than anyone." Elias nodded slowly. He did not smile. "I know the zones." The second man was Jorik. He was younger than Kessler. He seemed nervous and eager to please. His eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail. He admired Kessler's custom pulse rifle with wide eyes. Jorik was a follower. A man trying to buy his way into a circle that would always look down on him. The third member of the party was a woman named Lyra. She was quiet. She stood apart from the others. She was not checking her weapon. She was calibrating a complex scanner on her wrist. A shimmering holographic display briefly flickered to life. It showed a complex waveform analysis of the room's ambient noise. Her eyes were analytical. She seemed less interested in the hunt itself, more interested in the data it would provide. Elias began the standard briefing. He projected a map of the designated hunting ground onto the wall. Zone 7. A controlled environment. It was a section of the old financial district that had been walled off after the collapse. Xenahunt had stocked it with standard-issue stalkers, genetically engineered creatures with canine DNA and a territorial instinct. They were fast. They were dangerous. But they were predictable. Their behavior patterns were well documented. "The target is a pack of 5 stalkers," Elias said. His voice was a low monotone. He had given this speech 100 times. "We enter at grid 9. We track them west along the old maglev line. We keep communication channels open at all times. We do not deviate from the pre-approved path. Any questions?" Kessler laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "That's the public tour, Elias. That's not what I paid for." He tapped a command into his personal data slate. A credit transfer notification appeared on Elias's private feed. The number was staggering. It was obscene. It was enough to cover his sister's medical bills for a year. A wave of shame and relief washed over Elias. "I paid for the real safari," Kessler continued. He swiped his hand. The map on the wall changed. The safe, green-tinted schematic of Zone 7 vanished. It was replaced by a dark, unlabeled section of the city. A place colored in deep, warning red. The Ashen Core. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The Ashen Core was not a hunting ground. It was a quarantine zone. A place where other corporate experiments had been abandoned decades ago. It was a black hole on the city map. A place of rumors and ghost stories. "No one goes into the Ashen Core," Elias said. His voice was firm. "It's forbidden for a reason. The fauna in there is unlisted. Unpredictable. The structures are unstable." "Exactly," Kessler said, his eyes gleaming. "I've heard the rumors. A unique specimen. An apex stalker. Bigger. Smarter. The ultimate trophy. That's what I want." Elias looked at the credit transfer. He thought of his sister. He looked at the cold, determined face of his client. He knew he had no choice. The company had already approved it. The money was already in his account. His protest was just a formality. A ghost of his former principles. "The risk is yours," Elias said quietly. "But my rules are absolute. You do exactly as I say. At all times. Or the hunt is over. Understand?" Kessler just smiled. It was the smile of a man who had never been told no. "Don't worry about us, guy. Just lead the way." The journey to the Ashen Core was silent. They rode in a heavily armored transport vehicle. Its interior was luxurious. Soft synth leather seats and a fully stocked bar. Kessler poured himself a drink. Jorik watched him, his admiration plain to see. Lyra ignored them both. She was studying the schematics of the Ashen Core on her slate. Her face was illuminated by the cold blue light of the display. Outside, the decaying city of Cinderfall crawled by. The transport moved through the empty streets of the outer zones. Collapsed buildings stood like skeletal remains against the gray sky. The acidic rain had started to fall. It left shimmering, chemical trails on the vehicle's armored windows. They reached the edge of the zone. A massive, rusted gate blocked the way. It was covered in faded warning signs. Biohazard. Unstable structures. Extreme danger. Quarantine protocol in effect. The gate groaned open, its ancient motors protesting the movement. The transport rolled through. It stopped 100 meters inside. "This is it," the driver's voice crackled over the intercom. "End of the line. The vehicle will remain here. Your extraction is in 12 hours. Good luck." The rear hatch hissed open. The air that washed him was cold and dead. It smelled of dust and rust and something else. something vaguely metallic and unpleasant, like old blood. Elias stepped out first. He scanned the area. His rifle was held at a low ready. The clients followed. Their high-tech gear hummed softly in the silence. The sound seemed intrusive, disrespectful. "Standard formation," Elias commanded. "Jorik, you're on rear guard. Lyra, stay central. Kessler, you're with me. Keep your comms active. Report anything you see. Anything at all." They began to move into the ashen core. The silence was the first thing that felt wrong. In the other zones, there was always some sound. The skittering of mutated rodents. The distant cry of scavenger birds. Here, there was nothing. Only the crunch of their boots on the dusty ground. The sound seemed unnaturally loud. It echoed off the silent buildings. The environment was a graveyard of ambition. Collapsed overpasses formed jagged arches against the sky. The husks of buildings were covered in strange, phosphorescent fungi. They pulsed with a soft, sickly green light. It was the only light source in the deeper shadows. The dust was not dust, Elias realized. It was ash. A fine, gray ash that coated everything. It deadened the sound. It muffled the world. They walked for an hour. The tension grew with every step. Elias felt a familiar sensation. The feeling of being watched. He had felt it many times in the wild. A primal instinct that warned of a predator nearby. He scanned the rooftops. The dark, empty windows of the buildings. He saw nothing. But the feeling remained. "I have tracks," he said, his voice low. He knelt, examining the ground. The ash was thick here. The tracks were clear. But they were wrong. The stalkers in Zone 7 left messy, chaotic tracks. A pack of animals moving together. These tracks were different. They were precise. Deliberate. They were laid out in a perfect, spaced pattern. It was the pattern of a patrol. Lyra moved forward. She activated the scanner on her wrist. A holographic display shimmered in the air. It showed their position as a blue dot. And other dots, red ones, were appearing around them. "I'm picking up biosigns," she whispered. Her voice was tight with excitement. "Multiple contacts. But their behavior is strange. They are not scattered. They are moving in coordinated patterns. On our flanks." Jorik, at the rear, spun around nervously. His rifle swept the shadows. "I don't see anything." "Because they don't want you to," Elias said grimly. He stood up. "We are being herded." Kessler laughed, a low, excited sound. "Excellent. This is exactly what I paid for. A real challenge." He raised his rifle. He scanned the rooftops of the nearby buildings. "Show yourselves, you cowards!" The answer came not from the rooftops, but from below. A deep, groaning sound echoed through the street. The ground beneath Jorik's feet trembled. Then it gave way. A huge section of the derelict street collapsed into a sinkhole. Jorik yelled in surprise as he fell. His safety harness, a magnetic tether connected to Kessler, snapped taut. It saved him from a long drop into the darkness below. But his legs smashed against the broken edge of the concrete. He cried out in pain. Elias peered over the edge. The sinkhole was deep. It was not a natural collapse. The support struts beneath the street had been deliberately weakened, chewed through by something powerful. It was a trap. The stalkers had not tried to kill Jorik. They had tried to disable him, to slow the party down. A movement on a rooftop opposite caught Elias's eye. He saw them for the first time, not as a mindless pack of animals, but as sleek, shadowy figures. They moved with a liquid grace. Their bodies were long and thin. Their hides were the color of the city's gray dust. They blended perfectly with the shadows. Their heads were intelligent. Their eyes glowed with a faint, green light from the fungi. They were watching, assessing, learning. Elias felt a deep, primal fear. A fear he had not felt since his early days as a tracker facing a black panther in the Amazon. The rumors were wrong. This was not just a single apex alpha. The entire pack in this zone was different. Their intelligence had not just been enhanced. It had evolved. They were not just animals to be hunted. They were hunters themselves. He looked at the injured Jorik. He looked at Lyra, her face a mask of fascinated horror. He looked at Kessler, whose eyes were wide with a mad, ecstatic thrill. Elias knew then. This was no longer an urban safari. It was an invasion of a hostile territory. And his clients were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. Urban Safari, Part 2. The hunt is over. Elias's voice was cold and sharp. It cut through the thin, dusty air. Kessler was still staring at the rooftops. His face was flushed with adrenaline. A manic grin was plastered on his face. Over? Kessler scoffed. He was laughing. It has just begun. Did you see them? Magnificent. Perfect. Your man is injured, Elias said. He pointed to Jorik. The young man was dangling from the magnetic tether. His face was pale with pain and shock. We are the ones in the trap. This is a survival extraction mission now. Nothing else. Elias and Lyra worked together. They hauled Jorik up from the edge of the sinkhole. His leg was a mess. A jagged piece of bone pushed against the tough fabric of his suit. He was moaning softly. A low, pathetic sound. Elias administered a powerful painkiller from his medkit. The dose was strong enough to knock out a man twice Jorik's size. Jorik's eyes glazed over. His moaning subsided into a quiet whimper. We need to move. We need to find shelter. Now. Kessler finally seemed to understand. His arrogant smile faded. He saw the cold seriousness in Elias's eyes. He saw the genuine fear on Lyra's face. The thrill of the hunt was rapidly being replaced by the cold reality of the situation. He was not in control here. Where do we go? Kessler asked. His voice was subdued. He was asking for orders. There. Elias pointed to a large, dark structure a few hundred meters away. It was a derelict transit station from the old city. Concrete walls. Limited entry points. It's our best chance. They began to move. It was a slow, painful procession. Kessler and Elias supported the half-conscious Jorik between them. He was a dead weight. Lyra walked backward. Her scanner was active. She was their eyes. She was watching their flanks. They are following us, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were trembling slightly. Matching our pace. 2 on the rooftops to our left. 3 in the alley to our right. They are not attacking. They are just escorting us. The thought was deeply unsettling. The stalkers were not chasing them. They were guiding them. They were pushing them toward a destination of their own choosing. The transit station was not just Elias's best chance. It was where the stalkers wanted them to go. This was their territory. Their killing ground. They reached the entrance to the station. Huge steel doors hung crookedly on their hinges. They were scarred with deep claw marks. The inside was a vast, cavernous space. Moonlight, filtered through the gray clouds and the grimy glass of the vaulted ceiling, illuminated the scene. Dust motes danced in the pale beams of light. Old, forgotten advertisements were plastered on the walls. They showed smiling families taking trips to beach resorts and mountain lodges. Places that no longer existed. The station was a tomb filled with the ghosts of a dead world. Elias lowered Jorik gently to the ground. He and Kessler shoved one of the heavy steel doors shut. It closed with a deep, booming sound that echoed through the station. They barricaded it with a fallen metal beam. For the moment, they were safe. Night fell on Cinderfall. The phosphorescent fungi outside cast an eerie green glow through the grimy windows. It painted strange, shifting patterns on the walls of their concrete tomb. They could hear the stalkers outside. The soft, deliberate scrape of their claws on the pavement. The occasional low growl. They were circling the station. Patiently. Like wolves. Elias built a small, cold chemical fire. It gave off a dim, blue light. It offered little warmth. But it was something to stare at. Jorik was asleep. The painkillers had knocked him out. Kessler sat silently, his expensive rifle across his lap. His arrogance was completely gone. It was replaced by a quiet, simmering fear. He was a man who had never been helpless before. And he did not know how to handle it. Lyra was the only one who seemed focused. She sat by a window. She was studying the data from her scanner. Her face was a mask of intense concentration. "They're vocalizations," she said suddenly. The others looked at her. "I have been recording them. They are not just growls and hisses. They are complex. There are repeating patterns. Syntax. It's a language. I am sure of it." Elias felt another chill. He had tracked countless animals in his life. He had heard the calls of wolves, the songs of whales. This was different. This was intelligence. This was strategy. He stood up. He began to explore the station. He needed to know where they were. He found an old maintenance office. The door was locked, but the lock was rusted. He kicked it open. Inside, the air was stale. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. He found old computer terminals. They were dead, of course. The EMP from the city's collapse had fried them decades ago. But he also found something else. Discarded equipment. Old lab coats. And a faded logo on a piece of machinery. It was not the logo of Xenahunt Excursions. It was a corporation he had not heard of in years. A rival bioengineering firm called Gen Life Dynamics. They had gone bankrupt decades ago. Their assets had been absorbed by larger corporations. Their failed projects had been buried. Forgotten. He searched the office. He found a shielded data slate in a desk drawer. Its internal battery was long dead. But his own power pack had a universal connector. He plugged it in. The slate flickered to life. He found the logs. Old project files. Research notes. And the truth. The Ashen Core was not a dumping ground for failed experiments. It was a secret research facility. The stalkers were not designed for sport. They were Project Apex. An experiment in creating sentient bioweapons. Genetically engineered soldiers. They had advanced intelligence. The ability to communicate. The capacity for strategic thought. When Gen Life Dynamics went bankrupt, the project was abandoned. The creatures were left here. They were left to grow. To learn. To evolve on their own in this isolated, forgotten corner of the city. The final log entry was chilling. It was a video log. The face of the lead scientist was pale and terrified. "The subjects are learning faster than we predicted," he stammered. His eyes darted nervously toward the door of his office. "Their pack dynamics are more complex than we anticipated. They are setting traps. They are learning to mimic sounds. My team is afraid. We are abandoning the facility. We recommend full sterilization of the zone. The subjects are too intelligent. Too dangerous to be controlled." The video ended with a crash. The sound of shattering glass. The scientist screamed. The feed cut to static. The sterilization never happened. The zone was simply walled off. Forgotten. Until Xenohunt excursions found the old records. They saw the scientist's warning not as a danger, but as a feature. The ultimate, high-risk hunt for their wealthiest, most reckless clients. They knew exactly what was in here. They had sent Elias and his clients to their potential deaths on purpose. As Elias finished reading, he heard a sound. A scraping noise. It was not coming from the barricaded doors. It was coming from above. He ran out of the office. He looked up. On the high, vaulted ceiling, several of the glass panels were missing. Silhouetted against the gray night sky were the forms of the stalkers. They were on the roof. They were looking down at them. Then, another sound. A loud bang from the far end of the station. From the direction of the subway tunnels. The stalkers were launching their final assault. They were not just attacking the doors. They were coming from the roof. And from below. It was a coordinated, three-pronged attack. The hunt was truly over. The tables had turned completely. And the long, terrifying night had just begun. Elias looked at the faces of his clients. He saw their terror. He felt a profound sense of responsibility. And a deep, burning rage at the company that had sent them here. He raised his rifle. It was no longer a tool for sport. It was a tool for survival. The scraping sound from above sent a fresh wave of fear through the transit station. Elias looked up. Through the shattered skylights, he could see them. The stalkers. They moved across the high, arched beams of the ceiling with the terrifying grace of spiders. Their claws found purchase on the corroded metal. They were not just on the roof. They were inside the rafters. Looking down. From the far end of the station, a deep, rhythmic booming began. The main pack was at the barricaded doors. They were using their bodies as battering rams. The heavy steel door groaned. The metal beam Elias and Kessler had wedged in place began to bend. Then, from the darkness of the old subway tunnels, a new threat emerged. A single stalker, sleeker and larger than the ones on the roof, padded silently out of the blackness. Its eyes glowed with a cold, green light. It was the Alpha. The apex predator Kessler had been so eager to find. It stood there, its head cocked, observing them with an unnerving intelligence. It was not a mindless beast. It was a general surveying the battlefield. Kessler's fear finally broke. It was replaced by the cold fury of a cornered predator. He raised his pulse rifle. Finally, he hissed. He fired a single shot at the Alpha. The bolt of superheated energy struck the floor tiles in front of the creature, exploding in a shower of sparks and shattered ceramic. The Alpha did not even flinch. It simply took one step back into the shadows of the tunnel, melting from view. It was a signal. The chaos began all at once. From the rafters, two stalkers dropped. They did not fall. They plummeted with controlled precision, their claws extended. They landed silently on a high gantry above Lyra's position. She cried out in warning, her scanner flashing red. Elias fired two quick shots, not at the creatures, but at the rusted support cables of the gantry. The metal screamed as it snapped. The entire walkway collapsed with a deafening crash of metal on concrete, sending the two stalkers tumbling into a pile of rubble. They were injured but not dead. At the same time, the main door gave way. The metal beam snapped in two. The heavy doors flew inward. 4 more stalkers poured into the station. They moved low to the ground, their forms a blur of gray muscle and shadow. Kessler met their charge. He was no longer a sport hunter. He was a soldier. He fired his rifle with disciplined bursts. The first stalker went down, a smoking hole burned through its shoulder. The second dodged his shot and leaped, its claws aimed at his throat. He dropped the rifle. He met the creature's charge with a combat knife he drew from his boot. The two of them fell to the ground in a desperate, thrashing struggle. Elias saw the battlefield in a series of clear, cold snapshots. Jorik was a liability. He was delirious, thrashing on the ground. Lyra was trying to drag him to cover behind a rusted ticket booth. The stalkers from the fallen gantry were stirring. The main pack was overwhelming Kessler. And the true threat, the Alpha, was still a ghost in the tunnels. Waiting. Directing. They could not win a firefight. They were outnumbered. Outmaneuvered. He needed a new plan. His mind raced back to the scientist's log. The failsafe. The creature's engineered sensitivity to specific frequencies. It was a desperate gamble. But it was the only one they had. "Lyra!" he shouted over the chaos. "The generator room. In the sublevels. I need you to guide me." Her face was pale in the flashing strobes of the pulse rifle fire. But she nodded. Her hands were steady on her scanner. "I can do that. The schematics are loaded." "Kessler!" Elias yelled. "We need to fall back. To the maintenance office. Buy me some time." Kessler threw the stalker off him. Its claws had shredded his armored suit. Blood was welling from a deep gash on his arm. He scrambled back to his feet. He grabbed his rifle. "Go," he grunted. "I'll hold them." Elias grabbed the back of Lyra's suit. He pulled her toward the office where he had found the slate. Together, they dragged the barely conscious Jorik inside. Elias slammed the flimsy metal door shut. It would not hold for long. "Talk to me, Lyra," he said. He looked around the dusty office. There was a maintenance hatch in the floor. It led down into the sublevels. "The generator room is at the lowest level," Lyra said. She projected a 3D map from her scanner. A blue line traced a path through a maze of tunnels. The path is flooded in some sections. And I am tracking multiple biosigns moving in the tunnels below us. They knew we would come this way. The stalkers were not just smart. They were prescient. They were driving their prey into a perfectly prepared trap. Outside, the sound of the pulse rifle stopped. It was replaced by a triumphant, snarling cry. "Kessler is down," Lyra said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. The data was the only thing that mattered now. Elias ripped open the floor hatch. A wave of cold, stagnant air washed over them. "We have to go. Now." He lowered Jorik into the darkness. Then he helped Lyra down. He followed, pulling the hatch closed above them. They were plunged into absolute blackness. The sublevels of the transit station were a different world. It was a place of dripping water and utter silence. Elias activated the light on his rifle. The beam cut through the darkness. It revealed a narrow service tunnel. The walls were slick with black mold. The air was thick with the smell of decay. They moved through the tunnels. Lyra's voice was a calm, steady presence in his ear. "Turn left in 20 meters. There is a collapsed section ahead. We need to go around." The sublevels were a tomb. They found the skeletal remains of people who had tried to shelter here during the city's collapse. Their belongings were scattered around them. A child's toy. A faded data slate. A lifetime of forgotten memories. The water was the worst part. It was knee-deep in some sections. Black and oily. Strange, bioluminescent fungi grew on the walls. They cast a faint, pulsing blue light. It was just enough to see the shapes that moved in the dark water. Things that were not fish. They heard the stalkers moving in the tunnels around them. The scrape of claws on concrete. A low growl that seemed to come from all directions at once. They were being stalked. Patiently. The creatures knew where they were going. They were letting them reach their destination. Finally, they saw it. A heavy, reinforced door. The words, "Emergency Generator," were stenciled in faded yellow paint. Elias pushed the door open. The generator room was vast. It was filled with ancient, massive machinery. A huge diesel generator stood silent in the center of the room. It was a relic of a bygone era. "The main power conduit is on the far wall," Lyra said. Her voice was strained. "They are closing in, Elias. They are right outside the door." Elias moved quickly. He found the main breaker panel. It was a complex array of switches and levers. He had to reroute the power from the generator not to the lights themselves, but to the capacitor banks that powered the emergency flash system. And he had to link it to the station's old PA system. He needed to create a single, overwhelming blast of light and sound. It was a physical hack. He ripped open the panels. He pulled out thick, heavy cables. He sparked them against the terminals, creating new connections, overriding the old safety protocols. Behind him, the metal door of the generator room began to bend inward. A massive impact. Then another. The stalkers were trying to break through. Lyra stood ready, her small pulse pistol aimed at the door. Her hands were shaking now, but her eyes were clear. "They are through," she said, as the top hinge of the door ripped free from the concrete wall. Elias found the final connection. A heavy, copper switch. The master breaker. He looked at Lyra. He nodded. He slammed the breaker down. The world turned white. An impossibly bright light flooded the entire transit station. It was followed a microsecond later by a high-frequency sonic pulse. It was inaudible to human ears. But to the stalkers, with their genetically engineered senses, it was an agony beyond comprehension. The creatures screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. They collapsed, their bodies writhing on the ground, their claws digging into their own skulls. The sensory assault was absolute. The power surge was too much for the ancient generator. It sputtered, coughed out a cloud of black smoke, and then died. The station was plunged back into darkness and silence. Elias grabbed Lyra. "Come on! This is our only chance." He kicked open the ruined door. The corridor was filled with the twitching forms of the incapacitated stalkers. They stepped over them. They were not dead. But they would not be a threat for a long time. They found Kessler. He was slumped against the wall. His rifle was broken beside him. The Alpha Stalker lay a few feet away, its body still spasming. Kessler had made his last stand. And he had bought them the time they needed. They made their way to the subway tunnels. Lyra half-carried, half-dragged the unconscious Jorik. Elias covered their retreat. The escape through the dark, silent tunnels was a grim, silent affair. They could hear the stalkers beginning to stir behind them. The sounds of their pained whimpers echoed in the darkness. They reached the extraction point as the gray dawn broke over Cinderfall. The Xenahunt transport was waiting. The ride back was silent. The luxurious interior of the vehicle felt like a mockery. Jorik was alive, but his mind seemed to have retreated to a place no one could reach. Lyra stared blankly at the floor, her scanner dark and silent. The debriefing was held in a cold, white room in the Xenahunt Tower. A single corporate executive sat across a polished chrome table from them. He was a man with a placid smile and dead eyes. "A tragic accident," the executive said. His voice was smooth and rehearsed. "Unpredictable fauna. Kessler was a true hero. A testament to the spirit of the hunt." He pushed 2 credit chits across the table. They were impossibly valuable. "A compensation package. For your trauma. And for your silence." He then looked directly at Elias. And of course, your sister's care has been fully sponsored. Indefinitely. Xenahunt takes care of its own. It was not an offer. It was a leash. Elias looked at the credit sheet. He looked at Lyra. She was staring at her data slate. It contained everything. The scientist's logs. Her recordings of the stalker's language. The proof of Xenahunt's lies. She looked up at him. Her analytical eyes asked a single, silent question. Elias thought of the intelligent creatures in the Ashen Core. Victims themselves. He thought of Kessler's final, desperate act of redemption. He thought of his sister safe in her hospital bed. And he thought of the price of that safety. He slid the credit sheet back across the table. It made a soft, almost inaudible sound. "We're not signing," he said. His voice was quiet, but it was the strongest it had been in years. Lyra nodded in agreement. Her hand rested on her data slate. A silent promise. A new threat. The executive's smile did not falter, but his eyes grew colder. Elias and Lyra stood up. They walked out of the room. They walked out of the gleaming Xenahunt Tower. They left the world of the upper spires behind them. They descended back into the familiar, comforting gloom of Cinderfall. Elias had no job. He had powerful new enemies. He had a sister to worry about. But for the first time in a long time, he was free. He had a new purpose. Not to guide the hunters, but to protect the hunted. He looked at Lyra. He saw a partner. The data analyst and the tracker. An unlikely alliance. A new fight was about to begin. And as they walked, the gray dust of the city settled on their shoulders like a familiar cloak.